therapists are beginning to get in on the act with regards to tarot. In this one, we're going to look at the tower. The blasted tower. Crowley says it could also be called war. Now, therapists are starting to notice the tower has a thing about ego, and therefore are mentioning it more and more, I'm seeing. It might just be a passing fad. It might be here to stay. Who knows? I just find it very concerning and disturbing, but that's just me. Now, just bear in mind, everything I'm saying here is going to be subjective. There's lots of different Qabbalahs. There's lots of different types of tarot and lots of different ways these things get interpreted. Now, somewhere in that mix, there's some truth. There's some sort of consistency or some commonality. Not amongst the New Age lot, or the Wiccans. They're going off in a completely different direction, different at a tangent. So I'm really focusing on the Thoth deck, Aleister Crowley's work, the stuff that he has written about. If you are from a different tradition or different lineage, all that kind of stuff, then there will be some variance. And that's not to say that yours is wrong, but it might be. This could be wrong as well, who knows. So the Tower card connects the path of, well, it's the 20-somethingth path. I'd have to look it up. I can never remember off the top of my head. Connecting Netzach to Hod. And this is the path of Pei, the Hebrew letter. It's said to mean mouth. And so it is basically about the judgment, the spoken word, the spoken judgment of the Lord, and so on. But before we get into all of that, let's just have a look at some of the details on the tarot card that Crowley includes, and let's just have a look at some of the details that go with this. So if we look right at the top there's the big eyeball, and this, Crowley says or tells us, is the Eye of Shiva with 27 rays, the Eye of Shiva. There is a tower. It's quite an artistic rendition, this one, different to what you typically see in a tarot deck. Where there are sort of geometric figures. They're actually people. He refers to them as soldiers falling from the garrison. The tower is falling, and the people are falling out of that tower. And at the bottom there, you've got a big mouth, hence the probably fits with Pei, meaning mouth, firing out blasty, fiery stuff. Crowley refers to this as the jaws of Dis, and if I recall correctly, the jaws of Dis is something within the multiple circles of hell from that story. Again, not going to go into the details, mostly because I can't remember off the top of my head. So we've got a number of things going on there, and we also have over there on the left, we have the dove carrying the little branch there, and we also have a mysterious figure that looks a bit like a dragon with a solar thing going on around his head. Now that is Abraxas. Let me just give you a little thing about what Hermann Hesse says about Abraxas. Our God's name is Abraxas, and he is God and Satan, both the luminous and the dark world. Abraxas does not take exception to any of your thoughts, any of your dreams. Never forget that. But he will leave you once you become blameless and normal. Then he will leave you and look for a different vessel in which to brew his thoughts. That's from Hermann Hesse there. Now, Abraxas was one of the Gnostic gods. Now, when I say one of the Gnostic gods, it was really the supreme god. There was lots and lots of gods milling around back in those days, and they had the god behind the god, the superior, the big one, the big man. The true one, the one that we never get to see because we're being misled by all the false gods. That's Abraxas. So it's basically the core kernel of truth, the core kernel of true divinity, uncorrupted by human perceptiveness, uncorrupted by the machinations of the world and so forth. This is the true thing behind whatever this stuff of the universe is. This is future Andy here doing the editing. I said it was Abraxas. It's also Zenubis or Chenubis. I don't really know how it's pronounced correctly. This is the sort of the serpent lion god, another Gnostic god. Often interpreted to be the immortal spirit, the essence, the core essence of oneself, irrespective of all the other stuff that gets clad on top through our journey through the universe. There's other interpretations as well. It's also, I think, the first decan of Leo is attributed to, and so on. There's all sorts of other stuff within the Gnostic world. It's not an area I know a great deal about, which is why I just said it was Abraxas, not forgetting about the other one. Now, if you just have a look at the dove with the olive branch, I'll just take you a little bit from Luke chapter 3, verse 22. And the Holy Spirit descended on him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my son, whom I love, and with you I am well pleased." And then from Genesis chapter 8, passage 11, Noah waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. And behold, the dove returned to him in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth, and Noah waited 7 more days and sent out the dove again. But this time she did not return to him. The sequel to that is obviously the waters have receded and the dove doesn't need to come back because he's going out doing dove stuff, that kind of thing. Okay, so there's our card. Now, essentially what we have here is a tower, Crowley refers to it as a garrison, that is being blown apart, and the people are falling out of it. They're being liberated. Essentially, they are living a constructed reality within their tower, and divine forces are striking it harshly, destroying it, and then the people thus are liberated from the falsehood. So this is basically the dawning of truth, the dissolution of false perceptions, the dissolution, more importantly actually, of false constructs, the false ego. So, I've just come back to the screen. If we look at, we've got Hod over there. Now, Hod is largely intellect, communication, intelligence, sophistry, medicine, learning, studying, education, all that kind of stuff. A bit of travel goes in there too, because of the mercurial attributions. So that's basically conscious cleverness. This is called that, conscious cleverness, that'll do. And over there on the other side with Netzach, which is much more Venus as opposed to Mercury on the other side, with Netzach we have much more sort of artistic, creative type forces at play. Now, some people would say, and I don't know if this is really relevant or even correct, Hod would represent, say, the left, conscious, logical hemisphere of the brain, whilst Netzach will be the right hemisphere, more abstract, artistic, imagistic type hemisphere. And there's an uneasy tension that exists between the two. Now, we have to look at what happens when we travel from Hod to Netzach, if we're going up the tree. So we're going through the Sephiroth in reverse order. What happens? Now, once we've developed our Hod consciousness, and we've all met those magicians, those budding magicians, they've done their 3rd degree, 4th degree, whatever it is. They've turned up and they've had their ceremonies, and they've got the certificates, and now they go, I am a master magician, or whatever grade they have been given. And essentially, they may well know stuff. They may well have a few sort of party piece rituals they can do, without having to refer to the notes. They may well have their perfectly created altar or their sigils and their magical weapons. They've got all the stuff going on. They've learned ancient Greek. They've been doing their studies. They've got lots of stuff going on. Most don't, actually, I've got to tell you. But anyway, just imagine they have. Now, with that comes certain social consequences. Social consequences may well be you ostracize from normal people, but you take on a certain air of importance. You might have a certain air of status. Here's a classic scenario inside magical lodges. When you arrive, you're the new fresh face. You don't know anyone. You don't know the way things are done. You don't know all the weird sort of things people say to each other, what they're meaning, what they're talking about. You're not on the inside yet of the localized culture of that little club. You feel like the new guy. And you kind of might be a fish out of water not knowing what you're doing. But as time goes on, people start to drift away. They leave. There's quite a high churn of membership. Or the very few are going up the grades. They go to the inner order. They drop out of the outer order lodges. Now, what starts to happen is over time, you become the old person within the group. You might have only been there a year, but the new guy coming in doesn't know that. Just like the day you arrived, some of those people who seem to be sort of on the inside that you don't know yet, they might have only been there 2 months. But of course, as time goes on, now you're no longer the new fish. Everyone else is the newer fish than you. You've got a bit of status. Now, some people play that really well. And other people, there's a certain egotistical mindset that starts to get developed. There's a certain air of stupidity, arrogance, conceit there's a certain air of narcissism. Anyone who's been in the OTO will be very aware of some of the incredible narcissists that stalk around the Thelemic groups. It is quite a remarkable thing. So, essentially what starts to happen with people's spiritual developments and learnings and studies and all the rest of it comes a whole bunch of bullshit that basically gets in the way of truth. It gets in the way of the core essence of what the person is actually there for in the first place. Essentially now what they're doing is they're just journeying up the hierarchy in Malkuth. They're not developing themselves spiritually up the tree. They're just grandifying, is that a word? They're making themselves grandiose in the sphere of Malkuth to become important. They're fulfilling all their earthly egotistical needs. This is a problem. So now what we have to look at, in order to move across to Netzach, to ascend the spiritual tree, what do we sacrifice? What has to happen? What is lost as we basically traverse that path of pay, or as some people would just call it, the path of the tower, which is not quite correct, but it's good enough. What has to be lost? Well, this bullshit component, these false constructs, these falsities, this nonsense. Now, it's not just about the arrogance and conceit. There's not just those things. For a lot of people, what starts to happen is they take on certain things. There's certain realities that we take on board. It might be the realities of the world and how we perceive the world from family or school, from culture, from religion, whatever comes before, whatever shaped us. We start to turn into, or have turned into, something that's actually deviated from the truth. And people don't know it. They don't necessarily know that. There was an experience I had as a nurse. So I'd newly qualified and I was working up on a cardiac unit, which was temporarily lodged inside orthopedics, just one of those, as they were expanding this service being offered. And there was a guy there who had basically broken, on the orthopedic unit, who I got to know. He'd basically, in his 20s, broken his back. I mean, this is horrendous. He's never going to walk again, realistically. He's going to be disabled now permanently. And he was, was a sportsman. He was in sporting-related activity that he injured himself so badly. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I've got to tell you, that's a really thing that really disturbed me at the time. How can you say this is the best thing that ever happened to you? I was about 22, about 22 years old at the time. And he said, because he's been in hospital about 6 months now. Now, I'm paraphrasing everything here. This is not what he said. This is now me interpreting the kind of conversation I would have had. But essentially what he told me was that he was an idiot who used to do stupid stuff and he behaved like a bit of a prat. The accident made him wake up. And he's woken up to a whole bunch of stuff in himself that if it wasn't for the accident, he'd probably end up in jail, end up dead, end up on drugs, whatever. He would have ended up in a really bad place. And this place he's ended up in has enabled him to wake up to that. And he actually said to me, again, I'm paraphrasing, if I had the choice to going back to who I was before or going back to and being able to walk again, or staying who I am and not, then I would choose what I've got now. And that really troubled me. I could not get my head around that at all as a 22-year-old egotistical drunkard, for want of a better description. This didn't seem realistic to me. And yet I've had experiences now, I'm into my 50s, I can relate to certain experiences like losing a job. I had a catastrophic loss of job that actually impacted in multiple areas of my life. And I had to leave where I was in order to basically relocate for work. And that was an enormous upheaval, very, very unpleasant time. Best thing that ever happened to me. Because essentially it woke me up and I realized how unhappy I was doing what I was doing previously. And of course, in that relocation, I went through quite a tough time with that. I ended up in a far better place. And I think many, many people can relate to these kind of events. Now, these are largely events that are quite life-changing and traumatic, but they're not leaving people permanently damaged mentally. Some people, bad stuff happens to them. It's not like, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. No, what doesn't kill me can devastate me and never recover from it. We're not talking about these type of experiences. The path of pay, the card of the tower, represents the kind of experience that basically wakes you up. It is enough of a trauma, enough of a shock, that you basically have no choice but to change. You adapt or die, basically. And it leaves you a better person because it leaves you more honest and truthful about who you are, where you're going in life, and all of those kind of things. Basically, some of the false constructs start to drop away, some of our own personal false constructs. Now, these, of course, can be enormous things like loss of a job, bankruptcy, those kind of things. They can actually occur on a much more subtle level. For example, I have one that I'm going through at the moment. I think I'm out the other side of it now. Involving a dog I'm responsible for, and there was an incident. That's all. We'll leave it at that. And the incident, of course, is entirely my responsibility. It has left me shaken. It's left me quite disturbed and quite bothered by actually what has happened and what I'm responsible for. No one's dead. It's nothing massive. It's not going to be life-changing for anybody. But it did highlight a carelessness or a thoughtlessness on my part. As a person who considered themselves to be responsible, I took a risk I shouldn't have taken. And now there's been a consequence, and that consequence has been brought back to me. And now it's like, oh, now here's what could happen. I can go, yeah, that part of me, that action of mine is utterly inappropriate. I can now trace how many times I behaved in those ways in the course of my life. And the realization of that quality of myself is quite painful, quite embarrassing, and I better do something about that. I now emerge a better person. The pain of the light of truth now gives me insight to be a better person. So that's what could happen. I hope that is what has happened. Or, if I was a different person, I could do this. Doesn't matter, does it? Fuck it. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's no big consequence anyway. Who cares? I mean, worse things happen at sea. I mean, ridiculous. What's everyone making a fuss about? I could do that. Now, what starts to happen for some people is that when things come along that challenge them, they could be social faux pas, they could be so consequential things that happen. They simply brush it off. They become more arrogant, more conceited. Essentially, what starts to happen is they become more superficial. The depth of experience becomes shallower. And a lot of people start this process early in life, and they just continue that process through the course of their life. They never, ever allow anything to bring their own attention back onto themselves, and introspection to go, what is the truth of who I am? They have this thing of, I'm perfect, it's fine, it doesn't matter, I'm the greatest. Everyone else is just wrong. That kind of stuff, almost like narcissistic. And so what starts to happen is they bury it, and they bury it, and they bury it. Now, sometimes something happens later in life and they wake up, and sometimes they simply go to their grave. And they have spent their entire life superficial and shallow. So the path of Pei, the tower, represents ego-challenging experiences that liberate us in usually quite a painful way. The light of realization, the light of truth arrives, shining on us, shining on our core nature, the external thing that got us into that tower in the first place. It's not the consequences of being in the tower, it's the mindset that got us there. It's not the situation itself. It's the life, the person, the personality, the constructs that got you there in the first place. That's the stuff that collapses when this path is well trodden. It's not very nice, that much I know. So now, if we start to look at this as a initiatory process, the role of catastrophe in initiation, that's what the next section is called. Now, essentially, if we look at initiations, if we look at, say, the Masonic initiations, they're largely ceremonial. One of the problems is because these are largely sort of very fraternal type organizations in the different rites and the different organizations within Freemasonry that exist, there tends to be a much more gentlemanly approach to doing stuff. The candidates are usually protected from feeling awkward or uncomfortable. Whereas much more in the sort of the Thelemic traditions, the initiations really do test the candidate in a safe, non-humiliating kind of way. It's not about hazing. It's nothing like that. But essentially, the candidate is put into situations where their character or aspects of their character are tested. So now what we have is the person arriving for their initiation in whichever phase or whatever initiation is being done. They have a certain stability of who they are. Their personality, their function in the world should relatively work for them. They might have, all this inner torments that people have, all that kind of stuff, but largely it will work for them. And then within initiation, there's a moment of challenge, there's a moment of stress, there's that kind of almost like a crisis point is reached. There is a crisis of what do I do? And in that moment, there is something that comes to the fore with that candidate or with the person undergoing initiation. And then ideally what comes after that is an integration phase where the different aspects of the experience are integrated. And people put themselves together again, or through the ceremony, they are led through putting things back together again. Now, it's quite complex to try and explain that without going into specific examples, which of course I can't do. But essentially what we're doing is we're creating a scenario. Let me give you an analogy. It's something the military do. That classic thing of putting people under lots of stress, say in the basic training, fatigued and not quite enough sleep, lots of physical exercise, lots of training, lots of educational stuff going on, and lots of testing. A lot of people have a notion of themselves. They have a feel of who they are. They have a story they tell themselves of who they are, but they've never been tested. They've never known, actually, is that true? Their fantasy is what informs them. Oh, I know what I do in that situation, that kind of stuff. They probably don't. They until that situation arises, they don't know what they would do. And so the military have a great way of putting people into situations where the trainees get to discover actually what they do. And then hopefully they're given, if those who find themselves in error actually are then given the opportunity then to put that right and find a new way to behave in those things. They're building character. They're building characteristics. So an awful lot of what the candidate pre-initiation may well be dealing with is falsehoods of the kind of person they are. That's built largely around projective fantasy. And what we want to do is bring to the conscious awareness of the candidate the truth of who they are. Now, one of the key things with that, of course, is the person is usually in a hall or a building of some description or a room of some description where there's lots of other people. And of course, the candidate may find themselves in a situation where they completely screw it up, which is, of course, what the whole thing was designed to lead them to do. And then they're led through to do the next bit, which the integrative phase. They might be embarrassed by that. They might be embarrassed. But of course, in the discussions afterwards, they'll discover that that's actually exactly what everyone does. That's why that particular ceremony does that particular aspect. It's a way of bringing to the fore the truth. Now, if we go back to the Tower card, largely this is what the Abraxas figure is there for. That's what we also have the Eye of Shiva at the top, although Crowley hints there is a hidden thing known only to the super secret 11th degree, which of course everyone knows exactly what that is. Look it up if you don't know. This is the true bit of truth. There's the subjective truth. There's my truth, your truth. There's only one truth. There's the sort of the genuine truth. This is the Abraxas, the God behind the God, the Sun behind the Sun type mythologies. And that's where we're trying to get the person to, the core, honest truth. Now, I could go into all sorts of other stuff around Crowley's work, but you can read that for yourself. If you don't have the Book of Thoth, or some people say Tot, for some reason, I don't know how it's pronounced correctly, but the Book of Thoth by Crowley is by far the best one to get. There's lots of other stuff online, but I just want to go through, I've got a little list here, of additional things that are just worth exploring. If you want to study all the symbolism, there's just a few other things, like in the Bible, we've got the Tower of Babel. Now, this is kind of curious little thing. The Tower of Babel's story in the Bible is like that big. It's literally just a paragraph, I think, maybe 2 paragraphs. It's less than a page, that much I know. Essentially, people wanted to build a massive, massive great tower up to the heavens, and God didn't like it, so he collapsed it. And essentially what this tower was representative was, it was going to be bringing all the people together. And according to the story, everyone spoke the same language in this big tower. It's a symbolic thing. After God collapsed it, he scattered them over the face of the earth and gave them all different languages so they could confound each other by not understanding one another. So there's this thing about speech and tower. Just worth looking at that little thing. There's a little thing actually on my screen to read. The archetypal tale of human pride leading to divine intervention, confusion of tongues, and the fall of the collective ego inflation attempting to reach heaven through material construction. Yeah, the attempt to reach heaven through material constructs. You know those super churches in America? And I never understand it. You've really got these really sinister-looking, toothy preachers who are really quite crazy with these mega churches, and then all the faithful giving them money constantly because they're buying their way to heaven. I don't understand that mindset at all. I do not understand how people can look at that preacher and think he's somehow a good guy. I don't know. I don't get it. But these are people who are buying their way to heaven while he collects his jumbo jets and Rolls Royces and all the other stuff. We also have, just going to my list, Prometheus Unbound. I'll just read this one. The Titan who stole fire from the gods represents divine knowledge as both a curse and a blessing. Illumination that transforms but also destroys previous modes of being. So that's another one you might want to look up. We've got Urian. I love it's Uranus now, isn't it? It's not Uranus. Urian energy. In modern astrology, Uranus embodies tower energy, sudden insight, chaotic liberation, technical revolution, and the destruction of outdated structures. Again, that's all sort of fits in there quite nicely. And we've also got Pluto thing in there, which is the death and rebirth cycle exemplified by Pluto's mythology, spiritual transformation through complete destruction and regeneration at deeper levels of being. So this is largely very analogous to the death rebirth that we see within Tiferet and the classic thing within the third degree initiatory systems, or 3-degree initiatory systems. But this is not about a complete overhaul. This is about more the destruction of material stuff in our attempts to reach the divine within ourselves. The Tower of Babel fits perfectly for this one. As always, thank you for watching this far. If you made it this far, I'm quite impressed. Comment section below. Love to hear your thoughts. Any additions, any corrections, just stick them in there. And any requests as well. I'll see what I can do.